Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. Hope everybody's doing all right. Hope everybody's having a good day. Lots of folks here. How's everybody doing? We've got Nick Slottle. Welcome, welcome. Cave, what up, my friend? Congratulations, Cave. For those of you that do not know, Cave is screaming into the void. Cave passed his citizenship test today, so it's looking like things are good for Cave to be a citizen. Oh crap! My bad. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. Now I feel like I've spilled the beans. My bad. We'll delete that part out of the VOD. How about that? No one pay attention. Um, we'll fix it in post. Isn't that what they say? Sci-fi, welcome. Martest, good to see you. Yeah. Well, it's just a normal day then. So welcome everybody. It's happy Thursday. I messaged you on Facebook, but I need to know, have you read Eaters of the Dead? Yes, I own Eaters of the Dead. And I looked right here. But prior to this room being the streaming room, it was the spare bedroom. And I used to have a bookshelf right here. And I know that my Michael Crichton books were right here. So I for some reason, I looked to the ghost image of where that bookshelf used to be, where Eaters of the Dead used to be. So, yeah, because you just started chapter 1, and it's good stuff. So for those of you that are not aware, Eaters of the Dead is an adaptation of Beowulf, where Michael Crichton, I believe it was either his thesis or maybe his senior project or his PhD project. It was something to do with school. And he basically kind of rewrote Beowulf to be a little bit more potentially believable in real world. And I don't want to spoil any of the story, but it's really quite good. And if you like Beowulf, and if you've ever read any of other Michael Crichton books, or if you just sort of like kind of high genre fantasy, or like medieval fantasy, I would definitely give it a recommendation. It's a pretty good book. What up, Tuna? From work. Well, I'll just talk lower so that way nobody will know, if that's okay. So yeah, Eaters of the Dead is pretty good. I quite like it. You don't like the title. Everything anything eats is dead. You reunified China once with super glue. Your mother was furious. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. So Ibn Fadlan, here's the kind of crazy thing about Ibn Fadlan. If we take a lot of that stuff for face value, he probably would not have hit the. I guess what I'm trying to say here is if we go with Ibn Fadlan being the actual basis of this whole thing, the timeline starts getting really abused. I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
Tuna. Thank you, my friend. And Cave, welcome back to the adventure. Yeah, so it gets messy when we start trying to do overlapping timelines. It's a good story though. It's based in fiction. Let's just leave it that way. um, anyway, so yeah, the show is Adventures in History, where we talk about historical stuff. Specifically here, on Thursday nights, we cover history in chronological order, but to make it less confusing and more narrative, more narrative, we do regional assessments over the course of usually centuries. So tonight we're talking about the 6th century, and we do these things in sort of phases. This is technically like phase 11, but we don't really have to keep numbers up and all that fancy stuff. So maybe seasons is the better way of addressing this. So this is like season 11, episode 2. I should probably never name them that way, but you get what I'm saying. We're covering the 6th century, which is the year 500 to the year 600 of the modern era. And tonight we're going to be looking at China, that big thing down there, sort of larger area in that corner of the map. And if you have not been around for previous China streams, I can basically sum up the last 200 years of China by saying it's been rough. Spoiler alert, the 21st century is the big finale. Vipers. Now there's no reason to stick around. All right, they already know how it ends. Depends on how long we go. And Schmalnite was like, God dang it. Depends on how long we go. That's fair, sci-fi. I'll say this. When I first started streaming, I never thought that I would make it this far. I never really did. And I never really thought that I would be 2 years into it. I don't really do a lot of stuff like that would be finger quote like celebrating when stuff is like anniversaries or things of that nature, but I just recently passed 2 years streaming. So I never thought that I would even make it really 6 months in. I figured this would be some fling, something that I did as a joke, or maybe something to pass the time during quarantine. And then when I went back to work, everything would just, sort of just fizzle out and go away. And then, yeah, it's kind of stuck around. It's got staying power. And I have met a whole bunch of great people here on the internet and made a whole bunch of friends. And it's a great place to be. And I look forward to hanging out with you all every chance that I get. So it's been cool. He doesn't realize we're only here as a prank. Dang it! Dang it! Moose, what's up, man? How's it going? I've been streaming for 2 years, and boy, are my OBS plugins tired. No one likes the internet. Who likes the internet? That thing's gonna flop. There's no way it's gonna stick around. It's just like television and radio, a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Most Eisley. We shall have to be careful. This was a senior prank that is drawn out. And Sci-Fi is just here to post rat booty emotes. So, I haven't had a chance to catch a stream yet. But everybody go follow Sci-Fi Taoist, who has recently changed her name to Sci-Fi Toast, which I think is perfectly cool as well. But Sci-Fi has started streaming art, so everybody go give Sci-Fi a follow, and you too can hang out with the glory and majesty of Sci-Fi Toast and do some art and have some good conversation, I'm sure. As soon as I am able, I will be getting my butt over there. It just so happens that Sci-Fi has started streaming coinciding with David's big online con thing, and I feel sort of honor-bound to assist however I can in that when I'm able to. So, you're here because you thought there would be snacks. Schmonite, if you have snacks, you are welcome to eat them, as long as you brought enough for everybody. I actually have a pack of cheese crackers here, just in case I get munchy. That's usually for when I do Gundam streaming and I end up like 4 hours on stream. There are snacks. We sent them to the convenience store around the corner for you. Oh, there we are. There we are. Also, hey, Yafagich, good to see you. Hope you're having a good one. Uh, Also, hey, KP. I didn't see KP come in. Well, I mean, I saw it come in and I read it, but I did not say hello. I was very rude. I was not a very good host. Okie doke. Shane, China again. I thought we only had like a few weeks worth of history from China. um, Moose, I don't know if this is a specific reference to something that I've said or if that itself is a joke. Either way, there's a crap ton of Chinese history. We've been talking about China since we first settled humans in cities, basically. There's a lot of stuff in China that we could totally talk about. Gotta love China. China. They're bad guys. We're gonna start a trade war with them. Trade wars are easy to win. Both since we barely spend any time on it in school. Ah, see, there we go. There we go. There's the kicker. Here at Adventures in History, we cover world history. And that means history of everybody, not just history of white people. So, that includes China, one of the biggest and most developed and longest lasting civilizations in the history of humanity. Yeah, we're going to cover that quite a bit. Okay, so yeah, where did we leave off China? Well, we left off China, and they're in a bit of they don't really like each other very much. They've been in a big civil war that started all the way back in the 300s, and we're now in the 500s, and things have been on and off and on and off and on and off. But basically, China looked like this. There were two big dominant groups. We have in the north the kingdom of Northern Wei, and we have in the south the kingdom of Southern Qi. Now, everyone except the Klingons and the Andorians and the Ferengi. Yeah, we don't talk about them very much. I wonder if I could do history of Star Trek. Like history of Star Trek and Star Trek universe. I bet there's probably enough stuff out there to do that. I don't know a lot of it. I have not read any of the Star Trek expanded universe stuff. I have not seen all of the Star Trek shows. So, First Contact Day was recent. Ah, hey Inferno, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. So we're looking at China, and we have two big powers. The history of the future would be cool. Northern Wei and Southern Qi. Wouldn't that just be predicting the future? Shane predicts the future. Maybe that should be a point redemption. Shane predicts the future of a certain event. I don't know. Anyway, so the big things to remember here, or if you weren't here last time we did China, that's okay. I'll fill you in. Effectively, what happened is the northern part of China had been overrun mostly by several groups of people that were not native Chinese. Specifically, a big group called the Xianbei, and there were also several other large groups like the Xiongnu, the Tuyahun. So we see Tuyahun over here, the Rouran, and parts of this area had even been conquered by some Korean people, the Goguryeo over here. And this northern chunk of China had fallen to these different kingdoms, and for a long time there were very, very small kingdoms, and there were 16 of them or so, and then they all started fighting, and they all changed the boundaries about a bajillion times, and ended up with one big ruling family from the Tuoba clan of the Xianbei. And down here in the south, we have the remnants of what used to be the old Jin dynasty. So in the southern part of China down here, we have mostly what we call Han Chinese people who are ethnically Chinese, and they're trying to hold on to whatever they can. And that's going to be sort of the status quo where we left off. Now, there's a lot of other stuff going on too, because neither of these particular governments are what we would necessarily call super stable. The Kingdom of Northern Wei was very thinly led. And what I mean when I say that is the Xianbei overlords that were running the show were a very, very small percentage of the population. We're talking here, there were the vast majority of people in the region were Chinese, and the Xianbei were maybe 25% at the maximum, and that is probably being incredibly generous. It was probably much lower than that. So, what they had started to do in order to attempt to solidify their position and justify their leadership is that the Xianbei had started marrying into Han Chinese noble families. And specifically, if they could find anybody related to old Chinese emperors, they loved to marry into those families. So, this would give them kind of an air, of legitimacy, like, oh, we married the daughter of that guy who was emperor 100 years ago. That makes us imperial, right? History of the future would be cool. Read that. It would depend. If you are a time traveler from the distant future, you could relate your time's history, which would be the timeline's future, looking backwards at predictions of the present. They did not know the way. They did not know the way. This is the way, right? The way to Santa Fe? The way into San Jose. Wait till the way meet the Kurds. Well, the Kurds and Way probably don't ever directly have contact with each other. Though now that I said that, I'm second guessing myself. Let me explain how that might not actually be as bad of a joke as Viper thought it was. So the Kurdish people are mostly from this sort of region right around in here, right? This sort of region that used to be on the border between Rome and Persia, and Armenia sat right here. So the Kurdish people, if you look at the Kurdish populations today, they are in the countries of Turkey and a little bit in Armenia here, and some in Azerbaijan and northern Iraq and Syria. Again, still sitting right around here, right? This is where the majority of the Kurdish population is. And if we put on the modern borders, even this northern territory right here in Iraq is a state that's referred to locally as Kurdistan. And there's actually quite a significant Kurdish separatist movement that is trying to establish a country with national self-determination for people that are of Kurdish heritage. That would sit sort of right around in here. The problem is, of course, trying to convince all of these countries to give that territory up and then recognize the Kurds as an independent country. And that's probably not ever going to happen because nobody particularly wants to recognize the Kurds as an independent nation, because then they'd have to admit to a whole bunch of things like war crimes and genocide against them. Looking at you, Turkey and Iraq and Iran and basically everybody that's not Kurds in this area. Turkey really doesn't like the Kurds. No, they don't. And there was a really big kerfuffle, push-up, blow-up back in 2015 that stretched in 2015 and 2016 that coincided with an attempted coup against Erdogan that ended up failing. And as a response to that, the whole area that is populated by the Kurds was put under a lot of restriction, things like curfews, internet was cut out multiple times, the military presence was jacked up. That has largely gone away at the moment, mostly because the Turks now are much more interested in trying to hold on to Syria. So if you look at the map here, Turkey has effectively invaded this whole northern strip of Syria right through here. They did this under the auspices of peacekeeping forces, right? This is during the Syrian Civil War, which started back in 2011, which is still going on today. This, of course, is where ISIS got involved, and there were separatists in ISIS and Bashar al-Assad's regime, and then Russian mercenaries and all of this fun stuff. But Turkey really wants to hold onto this territory. So they are much more interested right now in, and most of their focus right now is on holding on to the territory that they have claimed around this region. But what this has done is actually taken a lot of pressure off of the Kurdish people, and a lot of this region over here in Turkey, which like 6 or 7 years ago was very, very unstable. This has all quieted down effectively completely. The terrorist attacks that were going on have not happened in more than half a decade, 6, 7 years. Because most of the Turkish military now is down here in Syria. So, this sort of border region right here in Turkey is more stable than it's probably been in a decade. Um, but anyway, the whole joke about Kurds and Wei, this region right here is an important region because it sits on the output of the Silk Road. And it might have very much been the case that some people from this area that were Kurdish people had managed to follow the Silk Road over as merchants, perhaps, to a region over here, which would be connected to the Chinese output for the Silk Road as well. So, this is the Northern Wei Kingdom right here. So if a merchant from the Kingdom of Wei had traveled over here, which China had controlled this area for a while, it had recently been taken over by a whole bunch of people that we referred to as Huns, specifically Hephthalites and Kittites. But anyway, there might have been a situation where a trader from Wei had met a Kurdish trader from over here, somewhere probably in this region today, which is about, all the region where we could say the stands. So it's possible that Kurds and Wei actually happened. Little Miss Muffet begs to differ. So Kurds really did beat the Wei. Perhaps. The leaders, anyway, that is much more accurate. The leadership of Turkey is the anti-Kurdish people. I have met Kurdish people. I've spoken with Kurdish people when I was in Turkey last. They don't like the government, but they live fine with their Turkish neighbors. And the vast majority of Turkish people that I met don't really give a crap if you're a Turkish or a Kurd. They don't really care because to them it's just like neighbors. A lot of the anti-Kurdish propaganda is from the government side, and that's a lot to do with Erdogan basically trying to run everything like a dictator. He's not necessarily the world's best dictator. Turkey is coming across as not liking anyone that's not them. Exactly. You said it better than I did. There we go. Erdogan seems to like Putin at the moment. Erdogan is trying to... Okay, so let me explain why Erdogan is sucking up to Putin. If you'll remember, during the Syrian civil war, let me turn the borders back on. One of the things that happened is Russia sent a lot of mercenaries down here to Bashar al-Assad to assist the Assad regime in holding on to the country. And Turkey, of course, again, took this region right around up here. And the reason that Russia wants Syria to be on their side, and specifically Bashar al-Assad in their pocket, is that Russia wants to build a big gas pipeline that basically connects the oil fields of the Middle East to Russia so that they can effectively act as middlemen to ship that gas and oil into Europe. So Turkey is hoping that they can suck up to Russia enough to sort of leech off of that deal. And especially if Turkey could be convinced to give up some of its territory so that Russia could build a pipeline for it, they might be recompensated by land that they're currently taking from Syria. Oh, so now we're seeing why. This is why Turkey has offered to host and has hosted peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, and why Erdogan is sort of being really quiet about the whole Ukrainian invasion. Turkey can get stuffed. I dig it. You should write the book Kurds and Wei. I live, also I lurk. Hey, Lumpy. Good to see you. Do you have special software or something for these maps? And this is actually a program that I'm using right here that is 100% free. This is Google Earth. So if you know what Google Street View is, you can download this program onto your computer, and it is basically Google Street View pieced together for the entire world. And it's 100% free, and I use it all the time. All the time. This is easily one of the best pieces of free software that exists on the internet, and I'm not exaggerating at all. Yeah, so this is Google Earth. And when I teach, I really enjoy using this because one of the things that I really like to do is show maps, if you haven't figured that out already. And I will use Google Earth when I'm in class to create an instant map. Like, oh, we're going to talk about, Somalia today. Well, here's Somalia, and the capital is Mogadishu, and here we sit, so on and so forth. Google snooping on Shane is very confused why he's so interested in the Middle East. You show maps? Never. Never. Yeah. A lot of the maps that I find, though, I look up on the internet. I spend a little bit of time prepping for each of these streams. I always have a couple of things. I have an outline, and then I have some photos that I try to show for every stream. And luckily, the world is becoming easier to access through things like the internet. And a lot of people, just as nerdy as I am, have made a whole bunch of stuff and put them in Wikimedia Commons, which means that they're free to use and you don't have to necessarily credit anybody. So, like this map that I showed here, this came from Wikipedia. Well, not Wikipedia straight, but Wikimedia Commons. Finding all of these maps in Spanish? No, 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 no. Los mapas. No, map is el mapa. Yeah, so los mapas. I said it right. Los mapas en español están muy difícil. Sometimes I do find things in Spanish and I'll show them and have to translate, but you know, a lot of these names are Chinese, so it doesn't necessarily matter one way or the other. Like Suda Chi. El Chi de Sud. Alright. Anyway. Anyway, so, yeah, we were talking about China, and then I got massive sidetracked. And that's okay, because we all know that tangents are fun, right? And if you all want to talk about it, I'll probably talk about it. But, anyway, the Northern Way, they're not very stable. They're kind of stable. They have a whole bunch of problems, especially with the locals, because they're not ethnically similar. They don't necessarily run things the way that the locals had been used to. But, you know, stuff. Stop it, Baxter. You know I don't speak Spanish. Now, in the south, down here in southern Chi, it's actually even worse. The government down there were people that were military usurpers. There had been a state there for quite some time that had been usurped by a general. The general had come in, kicked out the emperor, declared himself emperor, and southern Chi was both very unstable and very unpopular. So neither one of these dynasties are particularly well off, and now we get to basically wreck all of it. Fair warning, if you are really interested in this period of time, and this really just like lights a fire under you, this is one of the most difficult periods of Chinese history to try to approach. It is highly inaccessible. You can find all of the information, but studying enough to gain a mastery of the material is very, very difficult because things change so quickly and alliances switch literally sometimes by the day. And it is very, very difficult to keep track of what's going on all of this because none of these dynasties are going to last very long. The rulers will switch out and then they'll fight civil wars against the last ruler with the current ruler, and then a general will kill both of them. Anyway, this whole period of time gets very, very fuzzy if you're just trying to look at it from distance. You have to really decide, I want to learn this stuff to really go at it. So, let's pick up. Yes, this is significantly worse than Game of Thrones. And I would say that one of the biggest reasons that it's worse than Game of Thrones, especially coming from a Western point of view, is that the family names and the given names of these individuals are not based on, you know, Indo-European linguistic models. And even trying to remember the names, if you're not familiar with how all this stuff works, or if you haven't really spent a lot of time focusing on linguistic elements, you start wondering stuff like, is this, like, who is this? Is this Xiao Huan? Or is this Xiao Juan? Or is this, who is this person? And it gets fairly confusing. I will say, just to completely admit, this is difficult for me to get a hold on. And I particularly, if I were given anything in the world to study, this would be very close to the bottom of the book for me. Uh, it's worse because they went into production before writing any of the books. Yeah, they didn't plan out the plot arcs. They sort of just got halfway through and realized, oh crap, I can't govern a country without a plan. And then before they knew it, they were falling too. So let's specifically here talk about Southern Chi. And we'll start with them because they're the first but not the last to fall. Okay, so Southern Chi. There's a big mess here. There is a really long series of very weak emperors and very poor emperors. So Southern Chi was being run by a group of people that were, again, they had taken the throne through military means. They were not related to the emperors in any way. They were just the guys that had the power to take over the throne. And when they took over the throne, one of the things that they did was murder anybody that stood up to them. Right? For Spartacus. But at the end, everyone's like, this guy's emperor? Seriously? Yeah, pretty much. That sigh, that big dramatic sigh I've heard all week leading into this. Can confirm. I have fretted over this stream for a while. This material, again, it's not my go-to world. We'll just say it that way. I mean, all of history is interesting. Some history to me is just not as interesting. I like lots of different parts of China. This one is just so hard to get into because of all of this stuff just changing over. I'm doing pretty well, JMR. How are you, my friend? All right. So the people have taken over. The leadership of Southern Chi have taken over. They are mass murderers. They also have a whole bunch of parties, and they don't really care very much about leading very well, and they spend a whole bunch of money on stuff that they don't really need to spend money on. And that itself becomes problematic because the generals that are the generals for the new emperors are going to realize that they can kick out the generals that were the generals that took over the old empire, and they could put children on the throne. And what ends up happening is that Southern Chi ends up turning into a dynasty of children run by yet more generals. Yeah, so the generals overthrew the last emperor, and then after that guy ruled for a little while and died, his kids get put on the throne and the generals start running the show again. So we have this dynasty that is not actually running the show, they're running by generals, and then the generals are going to start a big civil war because one of the emperors ends up having two kids. Both of them are of viable age in order to run the country, so there's a gigantic civil war. And the generals basically kind of line up on one side or the other, and the war is really between the two generals. And we know that this is the case because at the end of the war, neither of the brothers gets to be emperor. The generals kill both of them, and then one of the generals kills the other general, and we end up with this guy. All of history is created equal. Some history is more equal than others. Yeah, history is great, but it has some filler episodes. It's like a filler arc, right? In manga. This is the filler arc where the writers had one good idea, and then for about 12 issues of the manga, they did slight variations of that same idea in every episode or in every issue. So it's like, hey, look, we're going to change the characters, but the same thing's going to happen. Anyway, this guy is the new emperor, and he calls himself Wu, so his ruling name is Emperor Wu, and he is going to get rid of the Southern Chi, and he's going to set up the Empire of Liang. Yeah. General Chaos, China in the 6th century. That sounds like a headline on 24-hour news. But the last seasons always suck. See, that's the great thing about China, Infernal. Next season of China is freaking amazing. Uh, they're just very uneven seasons. Like, Tang Dynasty China is friggin' cool. We just got to get there. And this stuff isn't like not cool. It's just very, very rough, and it's hard to get into. Or a bad 80s action flick. Yeah, I'll give you bad 80s action flick. But you'd have to spell chaos with a K if it was in the 80s. General Chaos. Anyway, when he takes over, Emperor Liang is actually going to. Emperor Wu of Liang is actually going to be fairly capable. He takes over in 502, and this guy actually rules from 502 to 549. So he's got a really long rule. He rules for 47 years on the throne. That's pretty powerful stuff. It's a filler arc, yeah. So it's the middle episode of a trilogy. I'll give you that. You're thinking back to the History Channel when they did history. Yeah. Is there any point in history where a main character has sex with a ghost a la Beverly Crusher? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, there's the myth where Isis has sex with the reconstituted dead body of Osiris, but he's not really a ghost. He's just dead. I don't know if that counts. There are lots of stories where I know some Japanese myths where people end up having sex with kitsunes, but kitsunes aren't really ghosts. They're yokai, which is slightly different. And ghosts are included with yokai, but kitsunes are not yokai. I don't actually know of any specific ghost sex stories. I probably could sit down and think of a couple if I really put my head to it, but or sometimes just the member from Osiris. Yeah, there's a whole magic about that sci-fi. You would not be surprised if that happened in the world of everyone. But hot action movie girl, I can't kill a general. He's secretly my father. Yeah. What's the worst adaptation for TV or movie that I've ever seen? That Aragon movie was horrible. I really did not care for that Aragon movie at all. Let's see. Not that Aragon is the world's best book series. It's a good series. It's okay. It's basically Star Wars with dragons. So much so that the second book is literally the plot of Empire Strikes Back. So history is better than season 7 of The Next Generation. Confirmed. It's like candy. It's fun, right? John Malkovich was just eating all the scenery he was in. Yeah, well, you know, John Malkovich can be a great actor in a crappy movie, so. Oh, no, for real history. Okay, for real history. That I've ever seen. The worst one that I've ever seen? I guess we have to play on like what we count as real history, because Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was a decent movie, but it is a horrible adaptation of history. I don't know. That's a tough one. Braveheart is really badly adapted from history, but it's an okay movie, right? You could say that same thing for Raul Julia and Street Fighter. Yeah, right. We can't ever know if history is real. Oh, now that's a hot take. We can totally know if things in the past happened. We can totally know if history is real. Just not all of it. We can't know that all of it is real. We can know that large portions of it are real. But anyway. What about Emperor Liang? Emperor Wu of Liang. What does he do? Well, this guy is pretty smart. And when he takes over, Northern Wei is immediately going to attack him. Because, you know, it's like new emperor, he's unproven, let's go beat him up. And one of the benefits that Northern Wei had here was that they actually had one of the brothers uh, from Southern Qi. He ends up getting killed, but they send him back down there at the head of an army, and there's a war from 503 to 507. Both sides beat each other up pretty badly, but Liang ends up winning. Emperor Wu pulls out the victory at the end, and is going to start changing the South quite a bit. Specifically, he's going to openly adopt Buddhism. No, not an assassin. He dies in battle. Um, so he's going to start openly adopting Buddhism and making some rules that are going to line up with Buddhist principles. For example, one of the things that he does is he doesn't like a lot of animal sacrifice. So, of course, Buddhism, if you follow Buddhism pretty closely, you're going to end up being a vegetarian because one of the things that you don't want to do is harm living beings. Some of these Buddhists end up going so far as to basically starving themselves to death, right? So he starts limiting animal sacrifices, especially to, ancestral gods. And this is really going to start hacking off the nobility because the vast majority of the nobility were still Confucian. And at that point, Confucianism was a blend of the Confucian philosophy that we still sort of know about today and the local sort of native religion of China. So it had formed this sort of symbiotic relationship with the local religion and Confucian philosophy. And they did sacrifices. That was one of their things. And so one of the things that Emperor Wu decided was, well, look, let's not kill animals. Let's just do stuff like vegetables, right? We'll give food sacrifice. And that's still a sacrifice, right? You're given food, and it's still valuable. And you can give some fruit or some veg, and the gods will be happy with that. And that didn't go over very well. He also, on a couple of occasions, actually went to Buddhist monasteries and did service for the local populations. And one time spent a couple of weeks effectively giving up all of his imperial status and putting on kind of like the robes of the monks and going out and doing Buddhist service for the local community. And a lot of people asked a lot of questions about this, like, why? No, he's the emperor. Emperors in China are supposed to just be like above the fray. They're supposed to be set aside. They're chosen by heaven, right? And this didn't sit well with a lot of people. Now, some people kind of got behind this, like, dude, this guy seems like he's actually trying to do something. He's actually maybe trying to be in touch with the people and actually work with and for the people. This is looking pretty good. And this is me speculating, but I speculate that one of the reasons he was able to rule for 47 years is that he wasn't a big, giant, pompous jerk. Like he actually seemed to try to be a decent human being. And it's amazing how far you can get if you're just being decent to people, right? I sacrificed all these Brussels sprouts. My cabbages! Right? Sacrificial buffet, indeed. He catches the train to work. Yeah, I mean, he's commuting with the regular people. He doesn't even get carried around on the palanquin very much, It does sound legit, right? But it made a lot of the nobility really uncomfortable. Mostly because they were sort of always thinking that he was going to make them convert. And they're like, I don't want to convert. And no, I just don't want to. But he's going to spend some time sort of getting his feet under him and organizing some materials and getting all of his, his sort of proverbial ducks in a row. And in the mid 520s, like 525 or 526 or so, he starts formulating this plan that he's going to begin trying to unify China. He wants to go up, especially into Northern Wei, and he wants to take over Northern Wei and bring China back together. The problem is that the Northern Wei army was very, very big, and even though Xianbei were sort of, again, just like a ruling crust of the population, they were pretty good fighters. They had a very well trained and very skilled army, and they had a lot of them. So he's going to start trying to do stuff maybe around the edges, right? So just along the border. Maybe we're going to take back a little bit of the north at a time. Just a little bit, just kind of nibbling around the edges, if you will. And then he's going to wait. He's never going to push really hard. He's just going to sort of take a little bit and then fortify, and then take a little bit and then fortify, take a little bit and then fortify. And what he doesn't know is that there's a lot of turmoil going on inside the Northern Way, specifically with the leadership. The families of the Xianbei had always been a little bit uneasy with allying with each other. They had come from a people that were fully nomadic, horseback people that were always on the move, and their alliances were always basically made between one person and another person. And when either of those people died, you had to reforge the alliance. And Emperor Wu knows that there's trouble in the waters in the north. And at one point in 528, the Emperor of Northern Wei gets assassinated. And as soon as this happens, he's like, okay, now is the time. So he sends the army up into the north really, really fast, and he's going to manage to take the capital, and he even manages to put his own emperor on the throne of Northern Wei, but it doesn't really last very long. It lasts for like just a little bit of a year, and then the Northern Wei army manages to reconstitute itself and push them out. So he comes back down. He waits about a year to reorganize forces, reconstitute forces, and then he evades again in 530. And he gets about the same sort of result. It starts off really, really well. He makes a lot of progress, and he wins several battles, but he can't follow all the way through and take them over. So he ends up retreating again, and then he waits for another year, puts the army back together, trains everybody up, and he's about to invade again in 531, but he actually catches a break. The talk of forced conversion gave you a random thought, namely, how it's interesting that a comedy routine alone was capable of completely eradicating the phrase from common usage. I didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, right? Yeah. Well, we also have to remember that in historical timeline sense, we are much closer to the Monty Python sketch than we are the actual Spanish Inquisition. And the further away things are through time, the less likely the large majority of people are to actually understand what it is. I would bet today that if you asked the average person what the Spanish Inquisition was, they probably would have no idea what it was. And what they probably are more familiar with, if they are familiar with it, is the Monty Python sketch. And they might even know nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition, and they may have seen that little clip, but they might not even know that it's Monty Python. Because time is inversely proportional to the percentage of the population that knows this stuff, right? I would bet that in the field of people that we have tonight in the room here, there might not be many people that have ever heard of Emperor Wu of Liang, if anybody. Because not only is time inversely proportional to the amount of people, distance, like physical distance, and also cultural distance are inversely proportional to the amount of knowledge in the general population. So my mind goes to Mel Brooks' Torquemada, don't beg him for mercy. Torquemada, do not ask him for forgiveness. Let's face it, you can't Torquemada anything. Dun, 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 dun. The percentage of people who don't think the Holocaust happened is terrifying. Yeah, that kind of stuff is unfortunately only going to get worse. As Holocaust survivors die, And as the number of people that have heard that story from someone that lived through the Holocaust and time dilation, there are going to be more people that deny the Holocaust. It's just going to happen. There are not going to be fewer people that deny the Holocaust. There are going to be more. The population is also rising, and even with access to things like the internet does not automatically assume learning is happening on the internet. Most of the internet is pornography and cat memes, right? Not that there's anything wrong with cat memes. Technically, or pornography anyway, as long as you're being okay and you're being an adult about it and it's not harming you or anybody else, right? But you can decide that for yourselves. You listen to the band all the time, Kings of Leon, right? You know that I could woo somebody. Because we're talking about Emperor Wu. Someone like Wu. Kings of Leon. That's good. I'm a little proud of myself for coming up with that one on the spot. I'm going to take a little bit of a pride moment on that one and pat myself on the back. All right. Crushed it. Thanks, Nintendo. I will take that W, Badbird. Thank you very much. All right. So, we invaded at an assassination. It didn't work out. And Sci-Fi's just like, oh. Get on with it. Thank you. Emperor Wu invaded at the assassination in 528. Didn't work out. Invaded again in 530. Didn't work out. Was about to invade again in 531 and then was like, oh, what's going on up there? Guess what? I don't know what's going on up there, but the North entered another civil war because it turns out that when you have a foreign country invading you with a really big army and they're wiping out big parts of your army, the people that are in charge tend to not have very stable rules. So there was yet another civil war in the North, and this is kind of like the big one. And he is going to, Emperor Wu is going to send up another army, and he's going to pack up his little pretender to the throne with the army, and he's going to send them up to the North, defeat the North, and the North is going to end up splitting in half. But why is the title When Caught Stealing? Oh, because the name of the song is Been Caught Stealing. You know, walk right through the door. That one. But Emperor Wen is later on. He's the guy that actually does succeed, but I'm spoiling the story. You came in just in time for Kings of Leon, and now you'll have to leave to go back to work. Thanks, Kyle. Hope you have a good one. Hope work is going well. So, yeah. All right. So now we have this. Yeah. The North has split, and we have Eastern Way, and we have Western Way. So Wen is now, Wen is later, but now is 532. So Eastern Way and Western Way. Thanks to Emperor Wu's efforts, he is going to put an emperor on the throne over here in the East, and the old leadership of the Way in the West is going to split out over this way. But I'll leave the stream running to contribute to the views. Thank you, Kyle. Much appreciated. When do we get cookies? I'm going to have to say whenever you get cookies. I unfortunately do not have cookies. I would love cookies. Cookies would be amazing. My neighbors are awesome, by the way. They would never see this to hear me say thank you, but my neighbors are really friggin' awesome. And they brought cookies by the other day just cuz. Just chocolate chip cookies. Here you go. Be a good neighbor. Thanks for hanging out. And we let them borrow some of our equipment or power tools sometimes. And then they make cookies. Like, how friggin' cool is that? How cool is that? We have great neighbors. Amazing neighbors. Easily the best neighbors that I've ever had anywhere that I've ever lived. Of course, when we were living in an apartment, that was not a hard thing to do. Oh my gosh, the neighbors that we have when we were living in that apartment in Tuscaloosa, They are characters out of fiction. You had an extra gallon of milk, so you ordered those cookie brownies from Domino's. Mmm. Mmm. I've never had one of those, but it sounds tasty. It also sounds like it was made in a store and then frozen and then shoved into an oven about 20 minutes before it got to my house. But I'll take it because I like junk food. Stop distracting us with cookies. I hope you brought enough for these cheese crackers for the rest of the class. I didn't. You know that character is in the movie? When is in how long? Dun 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 dun. Techman, I love it. Also, welcome, my friend. Anyway, we split the Northern Kingdom. Yay! Unless you're from the Northern Kingdom, and then you're like, no. Publix cookies are lit. I don't have a Publix near me. I had a Publix near me when I lived in Tuscaloosa, but I've not ever had Publix cookies. So, what's up with Eastern Way? Well, here's the deal. The puppet general that gets put in place was ostensibly put in place to be friendly with Emperor Wu of Liang. However, it doesn't work out very well for any of them. They are incredibly unstable, and they only last from 534 to 550. So not even a good 20 years, right? 16 years and the entire Eastern Way is just gone. Well, what happened to them? Well, what ended up happening is that the emperor that Emperor Wu put in place, right? So Emperor Wu is emperor in Liang. The puppet emperor that he placed on the throne of Eastern Way is not very popular. Go figure. He's a pretender to the throne. And he, again, was not a Han Chinese. He was this sort of Xianbei Han Chinese mix. And the government was very unstable from the get-go because everybody knew that they had been put in place and they were being backed by the Liang. And the generals are going to decide, you know what, we need to kill these people. So Eastern Way is only going to last about 15 and a half years, and the generals are going to run the emperors out, and a general is going to put himself on the throne, and we end up with something that ends up being called Northern Qi. And you're like, but wait, didn't we just have Southern Qi? Yeah, this is a different group from the same family. And if you remember me telling you that the timeline and the family lines all start running together, this is when. Now, what about Western Way? It's the same situation. The emperor that got ran out of consolidated Northern Way is going to get run off and killed too. And the new generals of the Western Way are going to be very, very weak. And so the generals are going to decide, guess what? We're going to rule directly. So they run those people off. And in 557, we end up with a new group in the West. So now we have Northern Zhou. And in the span of 15 years, we've lost both sides of the way. So we don't have any way anymore. We've got Northern Qi and we've got Northern Zhou. And, okay, cool. We just had 4 dynasties, and then we had like 3, and now we have 3 again, and 2, and anyway, it gets kind of confusing. By the way, this is the simplified version. If you're trying to learn all this stuff on the deep end, it gets real deep. They went out of their way. This sounds like hard-coded title in WWF. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, what about Liang, right? Well, Liang ends up being in trouble because when the puppet emperor in Eastern Way got run off, one of the generals from Eastern Way that was supposed to be kind of keeping an eye on things ends up coming down to the south in order to defect, basically. So Hao Jing is going to leave Eastern Way and come down to Liang. And he's going to be welcomed in because he was kind of supposed to be one of the people on their side anyway. But he gets down to the capital city, and he doesn't really like the way that Emperor Wu is running things, because, well, again, Jing is not really from the same world. They have different cultures and they're just sort of kind of doing their own little thing here. But Jing decides, I think I could run this thing better than Emperor Wu. So he starts a rebellion. He goes around and finds all of the people in the south that were supporters of the old emperor, the Emperor of Southern Qi, and he finds a whole bunch of nobles that had been directly affected by the fact that, you know, Liang killed a whole bunch of folk, so they had made a whole bunch of, you know, enemies with the nobility. And he goes and rounds up all those people that didn't like the fact that Emperor Wu was Buddhist, and yeah. You're still lurking while you fornicate an automated payment. Lumpy, that was the Freudian slippest of Freudian slips, my friend. I was really trying to figure out if there was something there, like you weren't trying to say the F word. But cheers. All on purpose. All on purpose. It was okay. We'll take it. It's all on purpose. Anyway, so Jing and is going to start this rebellion, and it gets a lot of support because even though Emperor Wu had made some friends and was doing things pretty well, he was fairly old at this point and made a lot of enemies, and a lot of people didn't like this very pro-Buddhist slant that he was taking and didn't like the fact that he had murdered a whole bunch of their family. You know, stuff like that. So Jing's army was going to lay siege to the capital city. And one of the things that they do is cut the food off, and they catch them at a particularly bad time because the city itself was in fairly bad shape. And they end up breaking into the city, and then they can't control the entire part of the capital city, so they effectively lay siege to the imperial compound. So Emperor Wu is inside the imperial compound, and they don't want to go kill the guy because that would probably start yet another rebellion against Jing. But basically, they starve Emperor Wu to death. So he is stuck inside the imperial palace. There are no supplies coming in, and he starves to death, which is kind of a hard way to go. You're doing it wrong. Automated payments are supposed to fornicate you. Only in Russia. Yeah, well, if the world were serious about sanctions, Russia would not be doing any automated payments. Yeah, Emperor Wu gets starved to death in his own capital. And when Jing manages to actually get into the palace, he's going to put Emperor Wu's kid on the throne, and to try to make it seem like he's not a jerk, he's going to give Emperor Wu the whole big royal funeral, right? So like the big to-do and the whole, you know, official period of mourning and all of that stuff. And he puts him in this really big tomb, and we actually have some stuff left over. So this particular thing is called a Tianlu, which is a lion of heaven. So Tian, again, is the Chinese word for heaven. So lion of heaven. That's a celestial being, if you will. And this is outside the tomb of Emperor Wu. Pretty neat piece of statue, but remember that the guy that commissioned it is the guy that starved him to death. So, cool piece of art. Didn't need it, didn't have to kill the guy, but you did. So, alas. Now, Jing is going to be a regent for the first kid, and when the first kid gets older, he's like, I don't like this first kid getting older, and gets rid of the first kid and puts the second kid on the throne. And then he just decides, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like being regent. I'm just gonna I'm just going to declare myself emperor. So he does. He declares himself the new emperor of Han, and he says, I'm going to restore the Han dynasty, and I'm going to be the new China. It doesn't last even a year, because the generals from Liang are going to immediately launch an attack against him when he does this. So the generals of Liang versus his rebellion are going to fight each other, and the Liang generals are going to defeat Huo Jing. And you would go, okay, so the Liang dynasty continues. They put the kids back on the throne. No, actually not. They kick out all the kids, and then a general becomes emperor. Did you really think that the imperial line was going to be able to stay there after the generals got powerful? No, that doesn't work in China in this problem. The problem goes, there's a problem, and then the generals go, we can fix it, and then they get there and they go, we can fix it better as emperor, so bye emperor, bing, and then they become emperor themselves, and then there's a problem, and the generals go and try to fix it, and then they kick out the old generals that are emperors, and they go, we can fix it better if we're emperors, and bing, they become emperors themselves, and this is literally the entire century. There's another 5 dynasties, so just strap in. Yeah. So, what are we looking at now? Well, we're looking at this. So we have the Northern Qi. You're like, but weren't they the Eastern Wei? Yeah, don't ask that question. But now they're the Northern Qi. And like, here's the Northern Zhao. You're like, what happened to the Western Wei? They don't exist anymore either. And like, here's the Qin. And you're like, but aren't the Qin supposed to be the Empire of Liang? And like, yeah, that doesn't happen anymore either. You're like, but what about all of this? That used to be part of Liang too. Okay, now we can talk about some stuff. So, what's up with the Northern Qi? What's going on with Northern Qi? Well, here's what's going on with Northern Qi. They're super weak. They're really weak. They don't have a lot of internal infrastructure. They don't have a lot of army, and just to be honest, they're not really able to exert very much of the force in the surrounding area. So they're sitting there and they're holding on to power, but they're sort of expecting to die, right? They were fighting each other pretty much. Yeah, everybody's fighting everybody at this point. Now, what about Northern Zhou? Okay, now here's something a little bit different. When this whole thing with Emperor Wu dying, and then Huo Jing putting himself on the throne, and then a big civil war happening, and then them killing Huo Jing, and declaring a new dynasty called Qin, when all of this stuff is going on, Northern Zhou is going to see an opportunity, and they're going to be like, I think we could probably take some of this land in the south. Everybody was kung fu fighting, right? Northern Zhou. I don't know if I spelled that wrong. I don't know if they were kung fu fighting. I would suspect that they were just fighting. Is Korean Peninsula taking advantage of this? So at this particular point, the Korean Peninsula was in a civil war with itself. The Kingdom of Goguryeo, which had been in sort of the dominant position, was fighting a civil war against the combined forces of Baekje and Shilla. And they were not doing so great at holding on to some of their land, and especially by around this mid part of the century, because this is about 557, or sorry, yeah, about 557. Around this period of time, Shilla is going to get really excited, and they're going to take over the Gaia Confederacy, and then take a big chunk of Goguryeo out, and they're also going to take over a big chunk of Baekje. So Korea is sort of looking internally at this point. And if you want to know more about that, you can catch the last episode, which would be Adventures in History, episode 95. We talk about all that Korean stuff. It's almost as if these historical leaders have never played Risk. Right? You don't expand really fast and leave one soldier in all of the back territories. You expand slowly and leave multiple soldiers in the back territories. Duh. You only move stuff when you've got like a 3 territory gap. I really love playing Risk. It's one of my favorite games. Nobody plays it with me. Or Advanced Wars. I've never played Advanced Wars, I don't think. Anyway, so all of this crazy stuff is going on with Qin, and Northern Zhou takes advantage. They're going to be able to expand down, and that's when they take over this big chunk of the south right here, in the midst of the civil war between Huojing and the last emperors of Liang. What up, late boomer? How's it going? Hope you're having a good one. Good to see you. Now, Northern Zhou is going to be a pretty powerful group. And they already know that they've got their sights set on bigger things. So they take this big portion of the south, and they look over and they see Northern Qi sitting there, and they're like, you guys are super weak. And Northern Qi is like, yeah, we're super weak. And they're like, how about we just come take you over? And Northern Qi was like, we'd really rather you not, so can we just ask you politely not to come take us over? And then Northern Zhou's like, that really sounds like you want us to take you over, so we're just going to come take you over. And in 577, Northern Qi dissolves. So they really only exist about 27 years before they fall apart, right? Anyone else picturing Northern Zhou as a guy with a beard and a flannel shirt? They might have had a beard, but it was very small and very well kept at the bottom, but mostly probably just a mustache. Or a Chinese Joe Biden. Oh my gosh. Okay, I guess. Now, with Northern Qi captured and a big portion of the south taken, Northern Zhou is in a pretty good spot. A pretty good spot, if I do say so myself. And specifically here, the emperor at the time is this guy right here. His name is also Emperor Wu. And you're like, wait a second, didn't we just have an Emperor Wu? Yeah. That was Wu of Liang. This is Wu of Zhou. And you're like, Wu of who? Yeah, exactly. Emperor Wu of Zhou. Or Joe Biden. Yeah, there we go. So this is Emperor Wu. He does have a beard, but again, it's like this, it's very thin, right? It's this very kind of thin and well-kept beard. It's not a big bushy beard that you might expect a guy with a big flannel shirt to wear. So, very, very thin beard. All right, so this is Emperor Wu, and he's the one that's in charge of all of this stuff. And here's where we get a really interesting figure, an interesting character. Let me just take that away. Yeah, let me just do it this way. Will that fit on one line? It will. Now, one of the generals, wait for it. One of the generals in Northern Zhou is this guy named Yang Jiang. And Yang is actually Han Chinese. And he's a Han Chinese general in the mostly Xianbei ruling leadership of Zhou. What up, Blue? Hey, what's this about China? We're in the 500s. Is this about the Three Kingdoms period? No, we are about 350 years past. Maybe a little bit less. Well, it depends on when you want to start the Three Kingdoms period as well. This is centuries after. Even the Jin Dynasty, which won the Three Kingdoms, is already gone. The Jin Dynasty fell apart in 420, and it started falling apart in the 313s. Or 313? Was it 313 when the War of 16 Kingdoms started? Or is that the War of Five Barbarians in 313? In the early 300s, the Jin Dynasty, which won, so like So Cao Cao, the guy that won the War of the Three Kingdoms up in the north, right? He's going to, well, not actually he, but his son is going to kick off the last of the Han emperors and declare himself emperor of the new dynasty called the Jin. Yeah, so 420, haha. Yeah, 420 is when the last of the Jin emperors is forced to abdicate. So we're even past that. We're in the 500s. Right now, specifically, we're at about 577. So it's about 350 years since the beginning of the Three Kingdoms War between Wu, Shu, and Wei. I'm glad you asked that question, though. That made me exercise my history brain. There was a similar joke after John Cena apologized to China for calling Tibet a country. No. He didn't apologize for calling Tibet a country. He apologized for calling Taiwan a country. Jiangxin. What a cute name. Did you say Xianshan? No, Xiao Xiao. Which is spelled like this, like cow cow, but it's pronounced like TS, so like Cao Cao. He was the ruler of the kingdom of Wu, which is, well, no, sorry, he was the kingdom of Wei. He was the ruler of the kingdom of Wei, which was in the northern part of the Three Kingdoms area. So Wu was right here. Sorry, Wei was right here. Wu is over here, and Shi sat right over here. And then this kingdom ended up beating Shi, and then turned over and beat Wu, and then united China under one dynasty again, and then Cao Cao's son. Are you not entertained?
That's not why you were here.
What's up, Ren? How's it going? Hope you had a good one. For those of you that do not know, Adventure Ren is a friend of the show, great streamer that does a little bit of everything. Sometimes arts and crafts, sometimes playing video games, sometimes doing book club, sometimes just chatting. Specifically about lots of different stuff, but specifically the book club is usually about botany, so Botany Book Club. And if you're interested in that, go give Ren a follow and hang out and have a good time. Ren, I know that you said that you got really focused on the sunflowers and you made lots of them. So I hope that those turned out well. Oh, Ren, you heard none of that stuff that I was saying very nicely about you. Last time I talked to Ren specifically here in the chat, Ren was working on some crocheted sunflowers. You're glad you turned off your Alexa before that stream started, otherwise you'd have so much takeout right now. I don't know when I don't know how that would have ordered takeout. For Botany Book Club? I don't know. Anyway, welcome, Ren. I hope you had a great stream. It's good to see you as always. I was telling everybody that they needed to go see you. Doing pretty well. You were doing book club stream today because you didn't have access to your computer on Monday. Ah. Yeah, so Botany Book Club is usually on Monday nights, and you should all go check out Botany Book Club and read books about plants because plants are cool, right? We're talking about China, and we're specifically about to talk about this guy named Yang Jian, who is a general in the army of Northern Zhou. Now, what up with him? He's an interesting figure, and let's talk about this guy for a little bit. So again, he's Han Chinese, and yet he's a general in the army of Northern Zhou, which was being run by a guy that was not completely ethnically Chinese. He was a Shanbei Han Chinese mix. And the Shanbei, again, were the ruling peoples. And this guy's pretty impressive, Yang Jian is. And he's impressive, like, kind of out the gate. Even at a very young age. Now, some of this stuff is clearly propagandized, and he probably was not as magnificent as all of the stories seem to lend credence to. But he was pretty clearly a bright child, really intelligent, learned how to read and write very early, was speaking very well, and went to the organized colleges at a very young age, and graduated from sort of like the military school at the age of 16. Right? You ended up making 6 flowers, but it was really fun. Well, that's cool. I'm glad you got some great stuff to work on. Again, I tried to do crochet, but like it just didn't take. At 16, he graduates from the military school, and he had impressed Emperor Wu of Zhou so much that Emperor Wu gives him a military posting at 16 years old. There's like this 16-year-old kid running part of the army, and he's just that smart about the whole stuff. He does so well in the army that he gets to marry the princess. So Emperor Wu's own daughter. He gets to marry her when he's 16. Like, it's just crazy. You're not supposed to be able to do this kind of stuff that quickly, but the guy is just like ridiculously intelligent. So in 577, I'm skipping something. Before he's even 30, in 568, he gets made a duke in the kingdom. So duke is like emperor, duke, like their next step up. This guy is the son-in-law of the emperor. He's roughly in equivalent position to the actual prince of the country. And if you look at the map of the territory that he has, his territory was actually kind of better than the part of the country that even the prince was running. So this dude is like, was his name Atreides? That ruffled some feathers. It did. People were really skeptical about this guy. It's like some, wunderkind's going to show up and just like sweep the emperor off his feet and marry the princess and then become a duke by 27 and gets put in charge of the army. And not like army. I mean like the whole army. And when Northern Zhou decided, when Emperor Wu decides to go take out the neighboring kingdom of Northern Qi, he's like, "You're my boy, go get him." And Young John goes over there and conquers the entire, Northern Qi region. Because, why not add conquering a country to your list of resume skills, right? I bet this guy played Risk. Right? He knows how to move stuff, right? And he knows when to expand and when to trade cards and stuff like that, right? So when the emperor dies, because Emperor Wu, he's significantly older than Young John, and when Emperor Wu dies, Young John is going to end up being asked to be regent, right? The family of the imperial, the imperial clan is going to ask him, "We would like for you to be regent." Chinese Alexander the Great, he doesn't get quite as successful. The territory that he conquers isn't quite as big, but it's roughly the same size. It's not quite as big. I bet nobody wanted to play with him either, right? Nobody wants to freaking play with Young John. That guy's going to beat you in like 10 moves. I'd actually like to look at now just square mileage of how much Alexander the Great conquered and compare that to how much Young John conquered. One thing that's going to be a little bit inequivalent is that Alexander the Great conquered all of his stuff much more rapidly. We got to remember Alexander the Great didn't make it past 33, so it's not quite as rapid as might be. But that's interesting. I'd like to compare the Alexandrian Empire to what's about to happen here. That'd be interesting to see. Anyway, So, the emperor dies, and the new emperor is a younger kid, and he gets sick. And then the imperial family goes, Yang John, we need you to be regent. Come in, be regent. And he comes in and he takes over the regency, and he starts making things run better. He cuts spending. He makes all the nobles get in line and stop partying so much. He reorganizes the military. He lowers the overhead of the Kingdom of Northern Zhou. And everybody immediately is like, no, this guy, he's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He clearly just wants to be in charge. Some people play checkers, some people play chess, but this man was playing Connect 4. But he can't beat Goku. No, Goku would just probably beat him by being dumb. Like, that was a great fight! So, as regent, he does all of these things that are really good and make the country unquestionably better, just objectively better. And then all of the other people are like, okay, we got to kill this guy. Right? Because that's what you do. A guy shows up, he fixes things, and then you kill him because he's too good at it. Nobody can be this good. You got to just go kill him. So there are rebellions, which he crushes. People send assassins after him, which he either finds out about and kills, or even at certain points just pays them off to go away. And they can't touch this guy. He's just too smart. And when the emperor dies, the sick emperor dies, there's a 7-year-old kid that becomes emperor. And the assassination attempts just sort of go up a level because they're like, okay, now he really is behind the throne. The 7-year-old kid's not running the country. Clearly, it's Yang Jian. He's the guy actually running the show. We got to get rid of him now because he's clearly going to just take over the throne. That's what generals do in China. You become regent to a kid and you just tell the kid to go away and you declare yourself emperor. And Yang is like, I don't know if that's the truth. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask the 7-year-old kid to give up the throne and name me emperor. And then he does that. And that's what he does. There's a sick emperor. You weren't kidding about this being confusing. So the Sikh religion has not even come around by this point yet. They won't be around for, where are we? About another 500 to 13, about another 800 years. I'm glad you don't have to take notes far too much, right? Imagine if you were doing your dissertation on this period. Out of curiosity, is this confusing because of the Cultural Revolution? No. This is just confusing because everything changes really, really fast. The Cultural Revolution doesn't actually have a lot of impact on the way that people outside of China view Chinese history. A lot of these documents had been translated and circulated prior to Mao taking over. And that's a fair question to ask, by the way. It's not necessarily an unfair question because Mao really did do his best to basically rewrite Chinese history from the beginning. And if you go to China today, the history that I'm teaching you would be very, very, very different than the way that the books in China would teach you. I have actually tried with what I would call a sincere effort to find Chinese history textbooks in English, and I have not been successfully able to do so yet. It's hard enough to find Chinese textbooks that you could get, sent over here to America, but I can't read Chinese. So to find one that has been translated to English so that I could read the propaganda that they were teaching, that would be fascinating to me. But I have been unsuccessful so far. You feel dusty, you're almost 40. The only thing left to do is buy After Eights and try out under the sun in the front porch. Lumpy, my friend, you are only as old as you feel in the moment. And I hope that all of the craziness that is in your world subsides and soon you are able to be a happy and frolicking potato again. You're already dreading the test, and there's not even a test. You're in Hong Kong, so you're curious. Oh, Blue, that's yeah. I mean, it's a fair question to ask because Chinese history, as it's taught in China today, is just utterly uh, obfuscated and edited and wrong in many instances. Um, but luckily, oh man, I can't even. I don't even know if I can say luckily. With understandable asterisks after this. One of the things that happened during the late 1800s and early 1900s was Orientalism, and specifically here, British and French and German people got really fascinated with Asia, and during that period of time, a lot of the Asian documents became sort of sought after treasures, and large portions of those histories were translated into modern languages, uh, you know, 50 to 100 years before Mao even took over. So uh, we have a lot of this history now because of horrible colonization. Um, Again, lots of asterisks here. I am not pro colonizer. One of the side effects of colonization was the production of a lot of these Asian texts in languages like English and French and German. So, how many pages will the essay be? There is no essay. You lived in Hong Kong in 2013, right. In a way, you feel lucky to have lived in a country that will not exist anymore soon. You enjoyed the food and the free borderline naive spirit of the young people there. Yeah, Hong Kong and the stuff that's going on in Hong Kong is absolutely horrible. I have ruined my Chinese audience already by speaking out very bluntly and openly against China. I'll go ahead and throw more fuel on that fire. What China is doing in Hong Kong is an absolute wreck of civil rights. It's a gigantic mess. It is going back on everything that they said that they were going to do. And unfortunately, the current dynast, I don't know what we call Xi Jinping anymore. I know he's technically president, but he's beyond that now. He's effectively ruler for life. Emperor, shall we go so far as to say? Anyway, those people are horrible people. They're horrible people. I mean, I don't worry. No, I don't worry at all. I don't say curse words on stream if I can avoid it. Sometimes every now and then one of them will slip out. But I completely agree with that sentiment. Specifically with the ruling party of the mainland, because a lot of the people in the mainland are incredibly poor and are completely disassociated from any sort of participation in their government. And a lot of the people on the mainland understand that what the government is doing is wrong and have effectively no real way to fight back against that. I don't want to say that against everybody on the mainland, because I would think that if shown the truth, the vast majority of those people would not agree with what the government is doing. Or at least it would be my hope that would be the case. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove me otherwise. Yeah, according to China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, they're just part of China, right? So, it's actually worse now with COVID. Yeah, because it's getting pretty bad over there, the Omicron stuff. I saw that Shanghai's locked down again. They had like 73,000 cases. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to go to China. There's so much interesting history there, but I wouldn't go. Probably, I don't know if I would go even in the next, I don't know, decade. I fear it will only get worse. Anyway, Yongjian convinces the last emperor of Northern Zhou, who's a 7-year-old kid, to give up the throne. And he takes the throne himself, and he names himself Emperor Wen. And he declares a new empire and a new dynasty, and it's pronounced Sui. Now I know it looks like Sui, it's pronounced Sui, like sway in the wind. Sui dynasty. Now, what is Emperor Wen going to do? He's now in full command. He's in charge. By the way, this is Emperor Wen. Emperor Wen of Sui. Pretty cool dude. Pretty neat clothing. Doesn't always do cool stuff. He's kind of a hottie. He looks old for his age. Well, by this point, he was in his 40s. This is after, the Wonderkind phase. But he takes over, and he's going to hit some really, really big reforms. Right off the bat, he's going to completely reorganize the bureaucracy. He basically dissolves the entire government. So this would roughly be equivalent to the president in the United States dissolving the entire cabinet and then rebuilding the cabinet. Same thing for the parliamentary cabinets and things like that. So all of the individual departments of the country of Northern Zhou, which is now the country of the dynasty of Sui, they all get dissolved, and then he builds them back in his own way. I am the Senate, right? So he's going to rebuild the country basically from scratch. And the reason he's doing this is to centralize power. He wants to be the one in charge. And this doesn't go over very well with a lot of the people that were in those positions, so he kills them. He kills a lot of people. A lot of people. And he also decides to really, really increase the penalties for certain things. For example, if you get caught talking bad about the emperor, you might now be killed just for talking bad about the emperor. Where previously you might get beaten and your stuff get confiscated. Now you get beaten, your stuff gets confiscated, and then they kill you. He, at one point, extends the death penalty to even petty theft. It's pretty common with Chinese interest. Yeah, you take over and then you kill everybody that you don't like. So, increases the penalties for crimes. He's also not going to trust the nobility just by basic premise. He's not going to trust any of the nobility. So what he does is puts his brothers and his kids in charge of the really important provinces, right? The ones that are the ones that have big populations, or the ones that are on the border. They're going to be run by people that are in his family. And he's got a few generals that he trusts, and he's going to put them sort of as a buffer right around the imperial province. The thing I'm taking away from these streams is that if you want to be remembered, you've got to murder a bunch. So, Vipers, that actually brings me to one of the rules that I have of ancient history. If you want to be remembered as the Great, there are two ways to do so. Number one, you build a bunch of stuff. And number two, you kill a whole bunch of people. And that's how you become known as the Great. And really great people can do both. Like Alexander the Great built a whole bunch of stuff, also killed a bunch of people. Peter the Great killed a bunch of people. Catherine the Great built a bunch of stuff, killed a bunch of people. Ramses the Great killed a whole bunch of people, built a whole bunch of stuff, right? What about Frederick the Great? Mostly building, but also murder. All of those people in the rural areas of Frederick's country got murdered. Reorganized, I think. Gotta call it the right word here. So, he's also, after a little while of reorganizing all of this stuff, and reorganizing means streamlining. So after a couple of years of on the throne with his new sort of lean, mean fighting machine empire, he's going to have enormous surpluses, both of trade goods and of food. So he's like, okay, now that I have a giant surplus of food that's controlled by the imperial group, I'm going to start new food distribution systems. And I'm going to control distribution of food. And because he's actually really intelligent with this stuff, he actually gets the food to where it needs to go. And this is going to cause a dramatic population rise. Let's not forget that China had basically been in civil wars on and off for about the last 200 years. And this takes a toll on the population. So I'm going to retrofit the food system. I'm going to get the food to the people. And then the people are going to be able to support more people. Bleh. He's also going to say, I don't need all of this money. So he cuts taxes. When's the last time you've seen an emperor cut taxes, right? That's what happens. So he's going to streamline the entire country. He's going to make a whole bunch of progress on stuff. And he's going to have this big surplus of money. Also, he's going to have a problem with a group of people called the Go Turks. Now, we mentioned these groups, or this group, last week when we were talking about Korea. The Go Turks were a group of people that were living mostly in this sort of larger steppe region right here. Now, the Rouran Empire that we had talked about in previous streams had effectively collapsed, and the Go Turks, who were Turkish, were sort of the new regional power up here, and they're going to consolidate. And next phase, when we get to the 600s, the Go Turks are actually going to establish themselves a big state up here. But the Go Turks had invaded into Korea. The Go Turks are also going to invade down here. And just to be honest, well, Emperor Wen doesn't really want to fight these guys. They're hard to beat because they're nomadic, they're on horseback. You can't necessarily go pin them down very easily. So what he's going to do, instead of paying the leader off, he's going to start paying off a group of people. And he's going to give a little bit of money to a lot of different people inside of the larger Go-Turk organization. And what this does is it prevents one person from having all of the loot and all of the payoff from China, and then they're all going to start fighting with themselves. Because they all want to be the good one. They all want to be the big one. And he's like, no, I'm going to give a little bit to this guy, and a little bit to this guy, and a little bit to this guy. And he's actually going to save money this way by distributing a little bit to more people. And then when the Go Turks manage to get ticked off at each other for taking some of my money, there's a giant civil war inside of the Go Turk territory. And at that point, Emperor Wen's like, hey, bro, talking to one of his brothers, you want to go beat up the Go Turks? And his brother's like, sure, send me up there. They put a big army together. They go up to Go Turk territory. They catch them completely unaware, and they beat the poop out of the Go Turks. It is an utter devastation. There's nothing left of the Go Turks for years after this when it comes to China. Not to be confused with the Go Turks, who had great legs. He's a smart dude. He's a pretty smart guy. So he also decides that the capital that he's in is a little bit too small for an emperor of his size. So he's like, okay, go build me a new capital. And they're like, okay, new capital? He's like, yeah, I want a new capital city. Capital cities don't just, you can't go to IKEA and buy the Kapital, which is my attempt at trying to say capital in Swedish. I don't know what it would be called. But you don't just go buy a capital city. He's going to have them go to the remains of Chang'an, which used to be the capital of the Han Dynasty. And he's going to say, build me a capital here. So they build a new capital city, kind of from the ground up, right beside the ruins of Chang'an. And he calls it Daixing, which is this glorious city, right? He will go on to build the Death Star. He does go on to build a whole bunch of stuff. He commands the construction of a lot of really big things, like this thing. The Sui Dynasty starts rebuilding the Great Wall of China. Now, if you see this portion of the wall, this is not necessarily the way that the wall looks like all over the place. Specifically, it's not really the part of the wall that you see when you see pictures from China trying to, kind of promote stuff to the public, right? What century is Attila from? Attila is from the 400s. Specifically, he's born in like the 410s or 420s, and he dies in the 450s. I think 453 or 454 is when he dies. So he was in last phase. We talked about him a couple of streams as the leader of the Huns who had invaded to fight the Romans. He dies in 452. No, I think it's 453. I think he dies in 453 because the Battle of Catalonian Plains is in 451. And then he goes on to be bribed by the Pope in 452, and then he dies in 453. It's not a nice thing to call that woman a very big thing. She's rather petite. How about this big thing? The wall here. Anyway, the section of the wall that is built by the Sui dynasty is not as grand as the big stuff that you see when you see people promoting come to the Great Wall of China. That's mostly built by the Ming dynasty several hundred years later on. But this portion here is specifically built by the Sui, which is, you can tell that it's older. You can also tell that it is not as, finger quote, grand as the Great Wall of the Ming. But it's still quite a bit of territory. You can see that this was a big construction project, right? When you think about it, given the maintenance, the Great Hedge of China would have been even more impressive, right? Hedges are good against tanks. Ask World War I Britain, right? Go Turks are no longer a problem. We can get rid of them. Another thing that he decides to build is something that's called the Grand Canal. So if we look at his situation here, so here's his new capital at the outskirts of Chang'an. And he wants the capital city to have access to this big river network. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to build a giant ditch that connects the capital to the river here. So he builds this, and he's like, I don't know if that's enough. So then he builds some more here, and then he builds this big chunk, which runs all the way from here to here, to connect it to this river network so that you can get basically all the way from the North China Sea by boat all the way to the capital city of Chang'an. Yeah, and there was already portions there that had been built by the Han Dynasty and that had been expanded a little bit by some of the southern dynasties. He's going to especially dredge those out because they had been compacted a lot by a bunch of silt over the course of centuries. So he's going to dig them deeper and make them wider and then connect everything all the way to the ocean. It's about 1,000 miles, a little bit more than 1,000 miles of canals that he has dug. Here's the thing about this, though. They don't have technology like we have. They don't have, even steam power. So when we say Emperor Wen commanded the construction of the Great Wall of China and they built 350 miles of wall, that's labor, right? That is person hours of labor. We're going to build a giant canal that connects the capital city to the ocean. That is thousands and thousands of hours of labor, millions of, maybe billions of hours of labor. And JMR is just continuing to draw parallels between him and Palpatine. He's even got slave labor. He did. It was built partially by slave labor. Lots of slaves. And specifically here, people that had been captured in some of the wars. I think what Blue's trying to say are peasants. Yeah, so a lot of poor people were sort of hijacked into doing this because they didn't have a job otherwise. So this was way too big and way too much. And even though he's doing a lot of things that are making China good, he is spending all of that money that he had made and more. And by the end of his reign, he's actually bankrupted the country. And he has worked tens of thousands of people to death. And he really doesn't care. So this is sort of like the backside of the whole thing. Now, in 587, he decides, I'm going to just go ahead and reunite China. So he invades down into the Qin dynasty, and in 589, Emperor Wen is going to become the united ruler of the Sui dynasty, and for the first time in over 200 years, China, north and south, is united. Now, this is from a little bit later. This is from 609. This is after our particular stream. We'll talk a little bit more about this next time we talk about China, especially the war down here in Vietnam and the expansion once again along the Silk Road trade routes. That's a little bit later on, but this is the Sui dynasty. And China had not been put together for 200 years until Emperor Wen figured out how to do it. And he did it by a combination of slave labor, intelligence, and ruthlessness. So China is once again unified. The thing about it, though, and this is kind of spoiling what happens next, one of his generals doesn't like him and starts leading a rebellion and is going to kick out his dynasty. The Sui dynasty, for all of their accomplishments, don't make it 40 years. But the one after them, the Tang dynasty, now those guys will be around for a while. They are in charge for about 300 years. So that's next time, though. But that means that we are done with what I had planned on talking about today. So if anybody has any questions about any of this stuff, I'll be happy to answer them, or if anybody wants to do any sort of point redemption, now would be the time. One thing that does need to happen is I need to go through my list of people that have asked for viewer redemptions for viewer request streams. So let me go down the list that I have here, and I will just call names. Is Metrand in the chat? Do we have a Metrand in the room? Metrand, art thou here? Metrand. All right. I do not see Metrand in the viewer list either. I know that David isn't here. How much of history is propaganda from the CCP, or is it CCP free? The Chinese version of history is recognized by historians as the Chinese version of history, and most of it is flatly discredited and nobody pays attention to it. The only thing that has had a little bit of impact is Chinese archaeological discoveries from about the 70s until today, because one of the things that China did was effectively weaponize and politicize their archaeological groups. So anything that has been published by Chinese archaeologists since the 70s has been met with an initial grain of salt, and they figured that out pretty quickly. So now if the Chinese government actually wants to have something taken seriously, what they usually do is partner with some archaeologist from outside of the country. But even that is potentially shady, because they're only going to partner with people that are potentially going to tilt things their way. You know, if you want to work in China, you have to have the approval of the government. If you don't say what the government wants you to do, you don't have the approval of the government. So when any news comes out of China about archaeology or historical discoveries, everybody that is a serious, legitimate historian just pauses and goes, "We'll see. We'll see." Because a lot of the stuff that comes out is just hot garbage. And it's purely to fit the narrative, and nobody pays attention to them. No serious historian is ever going to look at the communist version of history from China and teach it as fact. I have, in my now 20 years of historical experience, I've never run into any of the Chinese propaganda being presented as actual fact. Every time I've run into it, it has been, here's the crafted narrative, and here is the history, the actual history, as is understood by everyone else, right? But they'll make an exemption if you're a female Olympic skier. Yeah. Okay, so Metran is not here. I know David is not here. Vipers, I know that you were here. Vipers, art thou still here? Vipers. Yo, okay, so you are on the list. You had at one point told me that you wanted to redeem a choose your own adventure. Are you still so inclined, and do you have your idea ready? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I shall turn on the redemption then. Oh, I just realized that I don't have any of the channel point things turned on because I was doing Lord of the Rings history stuff. So I'm going to turn all of this back on. I apologize if you were trying to do stuff earlier. Vipers, I'm about to hit it. It's going to be 10K coming your way right now. JMR, if you want to redeem one, I put you on the list, which I am doing right now. But for me to put you on the list, you have to have 10,000 points if you're doing it the first time, which you are, and you already have to know what you want. I don't let people redeem it and not tell me what they want. You have to immediately know what you want. Okay, so you are now on the list. So Vipers, if you'll hit that magic button, I have made it available for you. I will take you off of the list. History of the Troubles, history of IT, history of cannabis. I will take the first one. I think that is probably the one that you might be most interested in. It's the one that I'm probably most familiar with. Foggage, you were on the list. You are currently now third on the list. The list is 5 people long. So it is Focus, Metrand, David, Foggage, Lumpy, and JMR Killer. So there we go. Erky Dirk. I got you, my friend. I got you, my friend. History of cannabis would be hard to do, mostly because the history is very, very, very long. And when I have to cover really, really, really long periods of history, the narrative is hard to create. If you had to replace the Bible in each hotel room, which book would you choose? Oh, that's a great one. I mean, my gut reaction would be Lord of the Rings, but that's probably not the wisest reaction. I don't know of a specific book. But I would replace it with a some sort of basic text that was an introduction to learning the field of logic. Specifically here, things like learning logical fallacies, how to create logical arguments, how to follow trains of logic. That to me would be a good book that I think everybody should have access to. I don't know the title of a book that like this. I don't know a specific one, but I would find one or I would write one that would be something along the lines of an introduction to logic. The Codex Astartes. The Troubles began in 1968. So back in 1690, there will be a run-up, right? There will be what I call a primer on British-Irish relations before we actually get to the Troubles, but I'll spend most of the time talking about the Troubles themselves. And I actually watched Belfast last night, and it was excellent. So if you're not familiar, Kenneth Branagh, one of the best actors of our time, wrote and directed a movie named Belfast about roughly based on his experience growing up during the beginning of the Troubles in Belfast. And it is an excellent movie. List of common misconceptions. Hey, that wouldn't be a bad one either. If you swap the Bible with the Silmarillion, would anyone really notice? I'm sure some people would, but a lot of people would be like, yeah, you know God's name is Iluvatar, right? Don't eat shrimp. It's called Don't Eat Shrimp. Is that the actually name of the book? You choose the Tao Te Ching. That's a fair one. The primer. They were bad, and then they got worse. Have you enjoyed The Wind That Shakes the Barley? I have seen that. It's quite a good movie. Anything with Cillian Murphy is like, I mean, he's a dreamy dude. Cillian Murphy is just like, there we go. Sorry, which movie? Belfast. The movie Belfast. I watched that last night. You didn't know he'd written it. Been wanting to watch it, but you haven't. Oh yeah, it's really, really good. Fun fact: the start where it transitions from color to black and white view is from East Belfast, but it cuts to a street that is supposedly in North Belfast, but was actually in England due to COVID restrictions. Ah, there we go. Shrimp eat poop. Yeah, they do. They're bottom feeders. So it's just one of the reasons why they're not included on the list of kosher animals or halal animals either. It's biological. It is biological. Yes, Tolkien doesn't terrorize his followers with eternal damnation quite as much. Yeah, pretty much. You were told back in the day that you looked. You were told that you looked like Cillian Murphy back in the day when you had hair. There's a little bit of it there with the jawline. There's a little bit of the jawline. A little bit in the brows, I would think. Cillian Murphy has kind of a serious brow that I think you might have. I see some resemblance there. Picturing you with hair is the hardest part, just to be honest. All right, ladies and gents. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything else that you got going on? Otherwise, we're about to hit a raid. I'm actually, for some reason, just really tired. I slept a long time last night, but I have been fighting. I have been fighting a allergy attack for about a week. Did I see your points? I'm not sure. What are you talking about there, Jamar? Did you redeem something and I missed it? See, I thought you contributed something to the stream show, or the community challenge. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. I got it. That all came through. Cool. Oh no. You don't redeem it right now. You hold on to those, and you'll redeem them when it's your turn. So you are now on the list, and when it gets to be your turn, we'll redeem it then. Best I've got is Arlo Guthrie and Ryan Dunn. You still don't recognize yourself without hair. Can we talk about the Troubles another day? Yeah, we will. That's what's going to happen. So what just happened is that Vipers redeemed a viewer request stream, which we'll actually do next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, if you come back by, we'll be talking about the Troubles, and that'll be the whole stream. And that's what we'll be doing on Tuesday. So specifically here, Tuesday, 1900 Central Standard Time. Yep. All right. let's go do a raid. I'm kind of tired, and we need to go do something to drop off the friends. I hope I get sleepy. That's the thing. Like I'm tired, but my brain is awake. I don't know if that makes any sense to you all. I don't know if you all understand or have ever experienced insomnia, but physical tired is not the same as mental tired, and I can be physically tired and not mentally tired, and I can go lie down in bed and my brain just be like which is what I feel like is probably going to happen tonight. Too tired to do stuff, too awake to sleep. Foggage. That might be the next Tuesday, as in not this coming Tuesday, but the following one, Vipers, or as in the 12th, because I was thinking the 12th. Are you talking about the 19th instead of the 12th? Because I can do the 19th instead of the 12th. Yes. Body tired, but your brain isn't pressing your eye. Yeah, pretty much. Just lying down is beneficial. Yeah, it is. And I've learned how to, like, at least decompress my muscles, right? And just let my body just... You're getting the internet swapped out on the 12th, so you might not have internet that night. Oh, that would suck. Yeah. Yeah. We can push it back. We can do it the 19th. That's fine. That's okay by me. And I did a Tuesday stream this week. It was history of Middle Earth, so I mean it wasn't like a history stream, but I wouldn't mind having next Tuesday off. I don't have a problem with that. So we shall do it the 19th. And we are. So there are two ways to get a viewer request stream. One is to pay the points for it, and the other is voted by the people, right? So the group actually votes. The group, the last time the group voted was they selected the Black Death as the stream, and I have a special surprise that I will not, under any circumstance, reveal for History of Black Death stream, and that is coming. Not too far away. So it will be a special, interesting surprise. But anyway, we're going to go do a raid. We're going to go raid my buddy Neo Realms. Neo Realms is an art teacher. He teaches art at high school. Can I wear a Plague Doctor's mask? Maybe. And he's a really cool guy, and he teaches he teaches art in high school, and builds computer games and does 3D modeling and does a lot of art. He's a really cool guy. Has an entire fantasy world that he and his friends are making. So we're going to go say hey to Neo Realms. Our raid call when we get there, as always, is adventure. And if you have those lovely adventure hat emotes, if you throw those in the chat, that would be appreciated. Thank you all very much for hanging out. The next time you'll see me for certain is next Thursday. We'll be doing Southeastern Asia, to kind of check in what's going on down there. So these are places like Thailand and Vietnam and Myanmar, places like that. So yeah, we're gonna have a good time, and it'll be a good one. And I'll see you then. Of course, I might be around this weekend doing some Gundam stuff, but we'll see. Anyway, take it easy, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good night.